Mandy and I welcome you back to day 88 of Reading the Bible 365. Today we're in the New Testament with Mark chapters 5 and 6. And I highlight verses I love in Mark in green because it's one of the Gospels. And in the Gospels there's 117 chapters, and Mark has just 16 chapters. Let's jump into Mark 5, the healing of a demon-possessed man. They went across the lake to the region of Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" So interesting, he knew that he was not only Jesus, but Jesus, the Son of the Most High God. Even the demons know who Jesus is. "Swear to God that you won't torture me," for Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. Can you even imagine that? And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Since Jesus demanded to know the demon's name, we learned the demon who had been talking was only a spokesman. He wasn't alone. "My name is Legion, because we are many." In other words, his demonic aunts, uncles, cousins, and more had moved in with him. They begged Jesus to give them permission to relocate to a new home, a herd of pigs. So Jesus let the unclean spirits enter the unclean animals, which promptly rushed into the sea and drowned. There's been a lot of begging in this chapter. The demons begged Jesus to not torment them or send them out of the region. Then they begged to enter a herd of pigs. The locals begged Jesus to go away. But here we see some begging that's God-honoring. This man who had been demon-possessed begged Jesus that he might remain with him. He knew that Jesus had delivered him, and he didn't want to leave his side. A dead girl and a sick woman. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue rulers, named Jairus, came there. Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciple answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some men came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher any more?" Ignoring what they had said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, "Don't be afraid. just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue ruler, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, the girl stood up and walked around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. I love these two stories here so much. Just really emotional for me. But just think about that. The little girl was 12 and the woman was bleeding for 12 years. And I know they didn't necessarily have hospitals back then, but just think about this. 12 years ago, this woman went into a doctor's office, hopefully trying to get some kind of help, right? They didn't really have, real doctors, but people would try different concoctions to help her. She was bleeding, and she was told, "There's nothing more we can do for you." At that same time, another woman gave birth to a little girl, and for 12 years they had joy. But this woman had been bleeding and had just been tormented for 12 years. And in both instances, the woman who was bleeding fell at Jesus' feet, and Jairus, whose daughter was dying, also fell at Jesus' feet. They knew that he could help, and they knew that they had nothing to give except just themselves to fall down at his feet. So they're both at his feet, hoping for a miracle, and Jesus delivers both. The woman who had been bleeding for 12 years is healed instantly, just like that. And the little girl dies, which I think is allowed by God so that way their faith would be strengthened even more, because when Jesus goes and says, "Little girl, get up," instantly she gets up. I mean, just like that. I believe God can heal like that again today. I think we need to believe more of that. But sometimes he does say no because he has different plans for us. But in this instance, his answer was yes. And because of their faith, they were both healed. I just love it. Mark chapter 6, a prophet without honor. Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. "Where did this man get these things?" they asked. "What's this wisdom that has been given to him, that he even does miracles? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son, and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "Only in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own house is a prophet without honor." He could not do any miracles there except lay hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. My note here says, they restricted him, and so he didn't do much. And I have another note, that it's an insult that he's just the son of Mary and a simple carpenter, as if he couldn't do anything. I have another great note. Will you believe him who comes? Will you receive him when he comes? Will you restrict him when he comes? And then back in 2006, the hometown boy came home, and they had heard his ministry and message and miracles, so they all came to see him. They were curious where he got the authority to do and say these things, because they were doubting. And why? Because they missed who he is. And what is this? The wisdom. They missed God. Jesus sends out the 12. Then Jesus went around teaching from village to village. Calling the 12 to him, he sent them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over evil spirits. These were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra tunic. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave as a testimony against them. Then they went out and preached that people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. Jesus gathered the 12 together and authorized these apostles to engage in an expansion of his ministry. As his ambassadors, they were to do what he had been doing, preaching the kingdom, casting out demons, and healing the sick. They were to take no extra provisions because God would provide for them through the hospitality of those who'd submitted to his kingdom agenda. Yet, as Jesus experienced rejection, his representatives would as well. If a place refused to welcome them and their message, they were to shake the dust off their feet as a testimony against them. This is a reference to the Jewish practice of shaking the dust off one's feet upon returning to Israel from a Gentile region. If people would not receive the king's message, his ambassadors were to symbolically proclaim their coming judgment. John the Baptist beheaded. King Herod heard about this, for Jesus' name had become well known. Some were saying, John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and that is why his miraculous powers are at work at him. Others said, he is Elijah. And still others claimed, he is a prophet, like one of the prophets of long ago. But when Herod heard this, he said, John, the man I beheaded, has been raised from the dead. For Herod himself had been given orders to have John arrested, and he had him bound and put in prison. He did this because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married. For John had been saying to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. So Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. But she was not able to, because Herod feared John and protected him, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. When Herod heard John, he was greatly puzzled, yet he liked to listen to him. Finally, the opportune time came. On his birthday, Herod gave a banquet for his high officials and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. When the daughter of Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. The king said to the girl, ask me for anything you want, and I will give it to you. And he promised her with an oath, whatever you ask, I will give you, up to half my kingdom. She went out and said to her mother, what shall I ask for? The head of John the Baptist, she answered. At once the girl hurried into the king with a request. I want you to give me, right now, the head of John the Baptist on a platter. The king was greatly distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he did not want to refuse her. So he immediately sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. The man went, beheaded John in prison, and brought back his head on a platter. He presented it to the girl, and she gave it to her mother. On hearing this, John's disciples came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. Jesus feeds the 5,000. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time it was getting late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered, you give them something to eat. They said to him, that would take 8 months of a man's wages. Are we going to spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? How many loaves do you have? He asked. Go and see. When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 baskets of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of men who had eaten was 5,000. I love that story so much. And I don't know if you know The Chosen, but that's kind of their theme. We're not called to save the whole world. We're just supposed to bring our loaves and our fish. And I love it, too, that Jesus first said, will you give them something to eat? He was putting it back on the disciples. They came to him and said, feed the people. And he said, you know what? You feed the people. And they were like, I don't know if we can. It would be 8 months' wages. And he's like, well, what do you have? And that's the thing. We always look at a big problem where we just think, oh, it's too big. But like, break it down. What do you have? Well, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. You know, what is that among so many? But they were about to see what that was going to be. And Jesus blessed it, and it fed everybody. 5,000 men, because they didn't really count women and children back then. So it could be up to 20,000, because if each man had a wife and 2 kids, you know, that would quadruple it. But, I just think it's amazing what Jesus did there, and it really helped to strengthen their faith. And I love that he had how many baskets left over? 12. And why 12? 1 for each disciple. As they came back with the scraps and picked it all up, each of them was carrying a miracle basket. And so, hi, baby. And so I just think that's really exciting how he had 12 baskets left over. Imagine seeing the expressions on the disciples' faces when Jesus told them, you give them something to eat. All they could say was, it's not on the budget. They didn't have the means to feed such a large crowd, or did they? They had overlooked the fact that the kingdom power had fed hundreds of thousands of Israelites in the wilderness for 40 years, Exodus 16. And it was the same kingdom power available to them through Jesus. You may not have much, but whatever you have enough to accomplish the kingdom mission God has for you. We are called to give God whatever we have, our time, our money, our abilities. If you have the compassionate Christ who has access to the all-powerful Father, you have everything you need. Jesus walks on the water. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. I put over here, he got rid of the crowd and the disciples. And I have here, when Jesus made, it's a rare occasion where he demanded his way. When evening came, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. About the 4th watch of the night, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately, he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves, and their hearts were hardened. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout that whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into the villages, towns, or countryside, they begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched him were healed. I've got a lot of great notes here. God's plan is precise. He sent them out into the storm to show them. God's protection is perfect, better against wind with Jesus in your boat than with the wind without Jesus. And God's presence is precious. They followed him for healing, like people today follow movie stars to touch them. To experience power or situations, we need to go through the storm to get to where he wants me to go. And we will not grow in the happy times. And also number 3, happy is not God's theme song for me. I love that. And also, Jesus meant to walk before because he wanted to show them the 3 C's. He was calm, cool, and collected, and in control of the storm. They were terrified, assuming that it was a ghost. The CSB's very early in the morning is literally around the 4th watch of the night, so this encounter occurred between 3 and 6 a.m. Jesus exhorted them, "Have courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat, and the wind ceased. He gave him his word, then he gave him his presence, and then their circumstances changed. I love this story too because he told them to get into the boat. He knew what was going to happen. He knew the storm was going to be there, and he went up and prayed, having time with his Father, which that's a whole nother thing right there. We need to take time away from all the busyness, even our own families, and go away and pray, and that's where you get strong. But then he saw them, and he came to the rescue. He didn't let them drown, but he wanted them to be tested. He wanted them to see that he could walk on the water, so he had God's power, that he could speak, and the storm would stop. And then he also gave them his presence. He was there with him. So I hope you remember all these great stories today. Be bold. John the Baptist was bold, got his head cut off, but he was serving God. So we need to boldly always talk about Jesus. And also remember, if you are sick, cry out to God. Ask to be healed. I think a lot of people don't even ask. Sometimes the answer is no, but why not even try, right? So be bold enough to try and believe that he can heal you. And then finally, when you're in that boat, just be brave. Because even in the storm, you're going to learn something, he's going to show you things, and he is going to be with you in the boat. So always remember, Jesus is in your boat. Have a great day, and come back again tomorrow for more of God's Word as we read this Bible 365. See you tomorrow. If you enjoyed this message today, I would appreciate a thumbs up. I would also love it if you would subscribe to my channel and pass it along to other friends who want to strengthen their faith in Jesus. I would love a comment on what you liked and also future topics you would like me to talk about. I would also love to answer any question you may have about how to put your faith in Jesus, the Christmas story, Easter story, anything at all. You can contact me through my website, which is nancyjoy2u. That's nancyjoy, the number 2, the letter u.com. You can also email me at nancyjoy2u@gmail.com. Hope to see you tomorrow.